E, like Mela.
Yes.
Okay.
This is what we're going to do for right now, because people are, we're going to move, no, take it around over here, because people are stepping on it and they're going to trip it. We're going to have someone go, come on.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good. Here, I'm gonna go get another pen from my husband.
And what city were you from?
Thank you very much.
Don't you see?
Yes, beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
I am kind of high school.
Thank you. This is, he gave me the, so it's here.
And what city started? North what?
They're watching that. They're already on it. Oh, then never heard them watching it.
My courtesans were, and now I see it on the thing. Courtesa is a city, you see, it was just a region. No,
Colchos. I'm from Odessa.
Yeah, oh yeah, so you were really close by.
Yeah.
Tell me your name.
Ellie,
Yeah, my grandmother was from,
2L, E-L-L-I-H. Yeah.
yeah, she was in Raw. I have the name of it. A cousin of mine found the whole family and all the records that they had actually saved. Yes. So, yeah. Yeah, pretty interesting.
She signs here first.
You sign here.
Let Jody,
She does her thing and then.
I always say it's
Sign
her.
it later because we can do anything we want.
Yeah, we're streaming now, and so people are watching us.
Oh, they're watching us?
Yes.
I'll pick it up afterwards.
Okay.
Oops.
This is great. Okay. I'm going to go sit down. Okay.
So you said you're from originally what city?
Neukotitsa.
I've never heard of that city.
Kotitsa is now a big city.
It is? Okay. I'm
Okay, let me get out of your way. Okay, we're going to get started now. You all know who I am, Rita Rubin. I'm the program chair of Sisterhood. And I'd like to welcome those of you who came in person, and I'd like also to welcome the people who are watching us on YouTube. So the program today is, it's good that it's around this time because we just had Yom HaShoah, and this is important in what we're talking about today. And I would like to introduce our two speakers. So the author of Stitched and Sewn is Jodie Savin, and the artist who did this amazing work is Trudy Strobel. So Jody is a graduate of Princeton University and the American Film Institute, where she earned her MFA. Following college, she worked as a playwright and poet while supporting herself as a musical director for such soap operas as The Guiding Light and As the World Turns, winning 3 Daytime Emmy nominations. Her poetry has been published in dozens of literary magazines. As a screenwriter, Savin wrote the award-winning TNT documentary Chico Mendes, Voice of the Amazon, and she wrote, produced, and distributed the independent films Bottle Shock, Noble Son, and CBGB. She has also written and produced feature films for Disney, Universal, Columbia, and 20th Century Fox. She lives in Pasadena. And I would like to thank you for doing Bottle Shock. If you have not seen this movie, you have to, okay? Because for those of us who are kind of into wine, okay, in the 70s, the wine industry in California was just being started, And there was a competition in Paris in 1976. And it was called the Judgment in Paris. And what it was is a competition for the best wines. And so, of course, the French, thought that the California wines were a joke. And so there was a blind tasting, and the California wine won. Very good. So both red and white. All right. So the film is just fun. I mean, it's great. So that's beside the point. Okay. It's not why she's here.
So much for being my PR person.
Yeah. Not why we're here.
Actually, a very good point. Thank you.
Oh. All right. So the reason that we're here is to look at Trudie's work. Okay. So Trudie Strobel is a child survivor of the Holocaust. Trudie settled in California, raised a family, and never discussed the horrors she had witnessed. After her children grew up, the trauma of her youth caught up with her, triggering a paralyzing depression. A therapist suggested that Trudie attempt to draw the memories that haunted her, and she did, but with needle and thread instead of a pencil, resurrecting the Yemenite stitches of her ancestors and using the skills taught by her mother, whose talent as a seamstress had saved their lives in the camps. Trudie began by stitching vast tableaus on her dark and personal memories of the Holocaust. What began as therapy exploded into works of breathtaking art, from narrative tapestries of Jewish history rendering in exacting detail to portraits of remarkable likeness. Stitched and Sewn is an intimate telling of Trudie's story. So, you want to take it from here?
Yes. Hello? Hi. So we'll share this, but we also have a backup mic too.
Oh, a backup mic. Okay, we'll share this.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. These are very challenging times in our world today. We are suffering from a plague of misinformation, and we're suffering from aggression that reminds us all of what happened to Trudie when she was a very young child. We're going to tell you how we met and a little bit about the work we've done together and why we think it's important. We will probably not go into a ton of detail about Trudie's life because it's in the book and you guys can read it in better detail in the book. But we're so happy that you came, and we hope you'll help us spread the message of tolerance. We need to have a lot more tolerance, kindness, and compassion in our world.
Well, Jody has a beautiful daughter called Maya, and she did a project for her school, and she wanted to meet a survivor about the Holocaust, a project about the Holocaust. Oy, oy, oy. I almost have to eat it. No. So her teacher or principal suggested that she wanted to interview a survivor. She suggested my name. Actually, she was in touch with the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, and they told her about me because we both live in Pasadena. I live in the Pasadena area. And so one day she called, and I said, sure, you come. And she comes with her beautiful little mother, and she comes in, dear friends. She has a challah in her hand. I'm open the door, and here is Maya standing. She's 13, and she's holding a challah. You know, tears come to your eyes with such thoughtfulness of such a young person. Of course, she would be a thoughtful person wanting to interview a survivor. And so they came in, and they looked at some of my work that I have on my wall, as we show you two examples here. And so Maya decided, she says, this has to be seen. And Jody, being a screenwriter and in publishing, she knows these things. You see, I'm very ignorant about such things. But as it turned out, they did publish and get this book published, and it is, can you hold it up there? It's Stitched and Sewn. Yeah, say it.
It's called Stitched and Sewn, The Life-Saving Art of Holocaust Survivor Trudy Strobel.
Right.
And we didn't arrive at the idea of the book right away. When we went to Trudy's house, Maya's idea was that she wanted to share her bat mitzvah with a child that had not made it through the Holocaust to that child's own bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
Because so many 1.5 million children perished in the Holocaust. So Trudy was carrying the memory of a dear friend, Leo Egan. Leo Egan had changed his name when he came to the States. His name had been Leo Zagierski.
Right.
And his child had been murdered in front of his eyes in Auschwitz. And so Leo was the last of his family to be able to carry the memory of Hannah. So he bequeathed the memory to Trudy.
Yes.
And Trudy bequeathed that memory to Maya.
Right.
And someday Maya will bequeath that memory to some other, hopefully young person, so that Hannah will never be forgotten.
Right.
Because every single victim of the Holocaust should be remembered. So Maya shared her bat mitzvah with Hannah, and Trudy came to the bat mitzvah. But throughout the whole process of Maya's bat mitzvah, she was thinking, people other than our family have to be able to see this amazing work. And to give you some perspective, these were pieces that would fit in our car, which is kind of a big car, but most of Trudy's work is huge. Yeah. She has an 8-foot piece that, like, we need a truck to carry around. Yeah. So that's why we brought these two very small pieces.
Right, that fit in the car, yes.
But these are, obviously, these tell the story of Trudy's experiences as a child prisoner of the Nazis.
Right.
And so Maya, it took her a little while. You can tell the story from here.
Yes. Well, it took, what? It took her a little while inside? No.
It took her a while to raise the money in order to put on a show.
Oh, yes. This 13-year-old puts on an exhibit. I didn't even know how she did it. I never asked questions. I say thank you all the time. And she did an exhibit in Pasadena, right? Or was it?
First exhibit was in Hollywood.
Ach du Liebe, in Hollywood, okay. And I'm sorry, I forget names and cities and so forth. But yes, in Hollywood.
And hundreds of people came to see this work.
Right. Right.
And she got a grant from the Dragon Kim Foundation, which is an Orange County foundation, not Jewish at all. In fact, if anything, it's Christian affiliated. But they understood that this is not a Jewish problem. This is a problem. Genocide is a problem that affects us all. Yes. And they gave her a $5,000 grant. She put on the first show, then she was invited to put on another show, and another show. And there's someone here who actually saw the show that was in Orange County.
Yeah.
Which went up right before COVID.
Right, right.
But during that process, Maya came to me and said, Mama, I don't have time to write a book. I'm in high school, so you have to write the book. So I'd never written a book before.
But she's a screenwriter, so, you know, you all have to buy this book and have it in your home and share it with other people, because this is the story of the Holocaust of one survivor, and that's me, Trudy Strobel. And, well, I was born in Neukotytsa, Russia, USSR, Russia, in Ukraine. It's in Ukraine, USSR. And my parents, they were expecting a child, and they were hoping for a little girl. And it was in November of '37 that the Bolsheviks took my father away, and they sent him to Siberia for being a Jew, and there he was murdered. And I was born in March of '38, and was that little girl. during the travels that my father had, he purchased a doll, and that was already, he gave it to Mama, and that was like an omen. It's going to be a little girl, because they wished for one. And so I came along,
And the doll was all you had of your father, because he was gone before you were.
I called it my Papa doll, and I carried it with me everywhere. So
Right here,
yeah,
you see Trudy carrying her Papa
Yes.
doll.
so, yeah,
Yeah, the green, the
Yeah.
little girl in green
Right.
is Trudy.
yeah. That's me. That's the pint-sized child. But I'm holding a doll. You can see the doll, right? And then the Nazis come in, and they tear the doll away from me. So that was.
Let me go back 1 minute. So her father was taken by Stalin's forces, and then a few years later, World War II, the Nazis come and take Trudy and her mother.
Right.
And they march them about 650 miles, we mapped
Yeah.
it.
But before that, they took my doll, my dear.
Right,
That's what
on
I'm
the
saying.
march,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And on the march, part of the march, I mean, it's kind of amazing they survived, because they went by one death camp after the next, and for
Right.
one reason after the next, they were allowed to keep walking, and they just kept walking.
My mother, she was a tailor. She learned to be a tailor, and she was very talented with the needle. So she would help to repair even the uniforms of some of these soldiers that were guarding us. And that's why I could stay with Mama, because children were taken away from the adults. And I know that through stitchery, I stayed alive there. And through stitchery, I saved my own life 2 times. And so needlework is very close to me.
And we'll explain it a little bit, how stitching not only saved them from the Nazis, but saves Trudy's life later on.
Right.
So they were basically hauled across all of Eastern
Right.
Europe, and
Right.
the first place they kind of landed for a while was the ghetto in Lodz.
In Lodz. And it was a very difficult place to live in. I should have more derogatory words. It was very dirty. There were nothing but barracks, and we were transported partially by train into Lodz. So here they are, the Nazis with rifle butts, and they pushed us into these cattle wagons. And I'll never forget a picture in my mind, as there were planks that went into these cattle cars opening, and I looked down, and there was this German shepherd with his mouth wide open and very shiny boots. This is one vision that has never left me. I'm now 84 years old. And and then you get into this cattle car, stingy, because people were transported already before, and here it was swept out. But you see, when you are standing shoulder to shoulder in this cattle car pushed in, they had a pail in the corner. But how does that help? You're in there, we were in there for 2 days. No food, no water. Bodily functions happen. Can you imagine the stench and the dirt that happens at that time? And so we arrive 2 days later, again going down the planks, getting pushed. Dreckiger Jude. Dreckiger Jude was my name, dirty Jew. And then told to which number barrack to go, and you come in there. The barracks had wooden beds, two stories high, and they had mattresses that were stuffed with straw. But at the time when we arrived, that straw had become mush, and it was filthy. The pillowcases, very dirty, and we then were told where to, where to go and eat. Okay, so we got. There was a cafeteria, a big room. We got some thin soup and a slice of bread. That was our food for long, long time.
So Trudy, after Loach, I can never say it. How do you say it?
Loach, yes.
Loach. They were taken to a labor camp. So
yes.
They were not in a death camp. They were
Yes.
in a labor camp because Trudy's mother was stitching and stitching. It was during the war. There was no material to be had. So anything that could be salvaged by an expert seamstress was. And so Trudy's mother's talents were very valuable.
Right.
And by this time, this had happened, what this
Oh
depicts.
yes. Well, that happened before we were put on
In-
that train. Yes. I thought we went over this. No.
Well, no, I think I interrupted
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But you can tell this.
Yes. Well, I had this Papa doll that Papa bought for me, and I had this with me, and this Nazi tore it away from me. And I cried, and Mama said, "Shah, quiet," because she was worried they'd take me away. This is, what happened. Either you were killed or you were taken away. And so I kept quiet. For many years, actually, I stayed quiet. And
Well, Trudy learned during the war that to survive, she had to be invisible. And that invisibility kind of haunted her throughout her life. And also the lack of words. When I met Trudy, she barely talked. When Maya and I first went to your house,
yes.
and my daughter's very quiet also. I'm not quiet. I tend to talk too much. But
But you see, it was because of this little person here that suddenly I was asked to share my life with organizations, with our temple, wherever I went, schools and so forth. And now I am able to verbalize things. This is all very new to me. It may be 5 years old. But that all happened through my Jody here.
so we'll get back to dolls in a little bit. But so they were in a labor camp for a while, and then liberation.
Yes. So a American soldier comes to the door, to our camp there, and barrack, I should say. "The war is over, you're free." Can you imagine to hear these words? The war is over, you're free. Mama said, "Trudele, we're going to America." And the reason that happened is when they were young, my father and mother, when they were young, there was a small opening in Russia for Jews to be able to emigrate to America. But by the time they came, it was closed again. So her wish was always to come to America. And so here we we're going to America. And then from there we were taken to
A displacement camp.
displacement camp, right.
And the displacement camp was pretty much like a labor camp or a concentration camp. They'd taken down the barbed wire and they cleaned them up a bit.
Yes, it was cleaned up. That's the difference, yes.
But it was not an ideal situation, right? But,
No.
but there was food, right?
Well, you see, food, that was the thing, a few years without food. And we did have food there, and then they found a place for us to live in Bavaria.
And I'm gonna stop you before Bavaria,
Okay,
because
okay.
one day in the displacement camp, the Red Cross came.
Oh, yeah, I forgot, sorry, yeah, okay. Most important point, I'm sorry.
And they brought gifts for the children. And you described it.
Yes, and they gave us boxes, wooden boxes that had pencils and erasers and a small toy. And mine had beads, you know, these tiny little beads. And I looked at them, and this is the first colorful, beautiful thing that I had seen. And I held them in my hand. I said, "Mama, look at this. Do you know something, my dear friends? I still see myself holding these beads from the Red Cross." And then Mama saw a spark in my eyes that she had not seen for years now. And she says, "Trudie will make something of this." And she cut a piece of her skirt, a black skirt, and actually two, and she sewed them together. And she found a pattern in the displacement camp of a goose, because I also said to her, "We'll make something of this, let it be a goose." Now, I cannot answer why I said that. Somehow, this is what came to my mind. And so she found a picture of a flying goose in the camp, and transferred just the outline of the goose, and then attached it to that piece of fabric from her skirt, and taught me how to, these beads that I got from the Red Cross, and taught me how to insert the needle, you know, to secure each bead. And this is where I learned how to stitch with beads. And she says, "Put the beads very close together at the neck, because the goose needs a stiff neck in order to fly." And that also has a meaning of having a straight life. You understand? To do the right thing in your life. That was her second meaning. And I didn't have enough beads. And she says, "We'll finish it in America." And of course I did. I was then 13 when I arrived in the United States.
So Trudy, when you were in the displacement camp, you were how old?
I was I was then 7.
7.
Yes.
And you didn't get to America till you were 13.
13. And I started, this was then they placed us in a town called Ammershausen in Bavaria.
So I'm going to interrupt you for a minute just to give you a little context. So they were in a displacement camp. They wanted to get to America. They had nothing and no one.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There was nothing and no one left.
Right.
I mean, they had the bit of the skirt, and now they had a few beads stitched onto it in this
Yes.
goose that they had a dream of.
Yeah.
But they were sent to a very anti-Semitic corner of Germany.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they were basically hostages there for 5 years.
Yes.
While, I mean, our own American policies of like xenophobic policies, which were saying, you know, we can't let this many immigrants in, it's too many immigrants, you know,
Yeah.
kept them from being able to leave the country that had nearly assassinated them.
Yeah.
So for 5 years you were in the
Right.
town of
Yes, of this town.
You say the name of the town.
Right, and right, anti-Semitic. I'm in line to go into class, and behind me I'd hear "Dreckiger Jude." It just kept going, don't you see? It was way after the war already. And I mean...
And this town, say the name of the town.
Ermershausen, yeah.
This town had a terrible history during the war.
Yeah.
They basically wiped out all of the Jews in the town, families that had been there for a long, long time, and they took all of their possessions.
Right.
And we tell one of the horrible stories in the book, but...
We were placed in a house that was empty. And you see, this was a Jewish home. All the Jews in this Ammershausen no longer were there. But the new imprisoned Jews from the east, these were German Jews. We came from Ukraine, as you remember, we then got a room in these empty houses that were there. Yeah.
And Trudy went to school and learned German.
Yes, yes.
But it took
yes.
them 5 years to get the paperwork to go through that would allow them passage to the United States. And they had to come up with all sorts of ways to fill out that paperwork in different ways in order to get themselves here. But they did get on a boat.
Right.
5 years later.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And on a boat called General Hahn, and it was an army ship. And it wasn't that big of a ship, but the Atlantic Ocean at that time, this was in the fall, was very nervous. I mean, the waves were high. It was very difficult. Lots of good food. You smelled the food, but a lot of people got sick. They couldn't eat. And not even my sweet little motherling, she couldn't eat. And yes, and then it took about 6 days to get to New York. And all of a sudden the captain says, "Statue of Liberty!" And we all ran up on deck to see the Statue of Liberty. Crying going on. I so remember that moment. And from there, we went on a train to go to Chicago, and this is where we started our life in America, my mama and I.
And at this point, you're 13, 14?
No, that's when I came to America. Yes,
Yeah, okay.
13, yes. I was 13 years old when I came to America.
So I just want to say, Trudy's mother was not a particularly educated woman. She was a seamstress, and after her father was taken by the Nazis,
Yes.
she milked the cows on the farm. She had to carry, this was a collective farm. She had to, in order to survive, she had to make herself useful. But this woman is such a hero, Masha, because she used every bit of intelligence, every bit of ingenuity, every bit of cunning that she could muster and think of to save herself and her precious child.
Yes.
And she was a superhero. I mean, it's unbelievable what she was able to do, because there were so many times during their journeys that they could not have survived.
Right. It was through her talents and the right word would be tenacity, right? She really...
And ingenuity,
Yes.
and she was a brilliant woman, because...
Right. She had 3 years of education. At that time in Ukraine, that's all you had. Women, women went 3 years to school. I don't know if you know this, but that's what happened in that country. So she was, many things that she had learned through her life was self-education later on, Yeah.
So a few years later, Trudy's now 18, living in Chicago.
Yes.
She and her mother are stitching,
Yes.
right, to
Yes.
make a living.
Right.
And Tante Teresa, who is her mother's friend, came to
Yes.
her one day and
Yes.
said,
Oh, well, this I must really share with you. I'm now 18, and Tante Teresa, a friend of my mother's, she says, "Masha, do I have a wonderful, a schöner Jiddische boy for Gertrude, a German boy." German, I said, "Oi, not realizing, I mean, for a second you don't realize what you're saying."
the German boy would be wearing?
I thought it was arranged. He came on a Sunday. And I thought he would be wearing, the reason I said this, I was thinking of lederhosen, in Bavaria, that's all the boys wore. And then in the winter, they wore stockings. And so...
She did not want to see any more lederhosen.
So this Sunday, he came over with Tante Teresa. And we had just one room that we lived in Chicago, and next to it was like a storage room, but we could really use it for other things because we cooked in the room and everything, we lived in that room. So I come in a little bit later. I knew that the young man was there. And I come in, and it was kitty corner, and this young man gets up. He's gorgeous. Oi, 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 what a schöner Junge. And he had a tan suit on and tie and manners of special manners. He got up and greeted us. So we saw each other that day. And the following week, we were invited to Tante Teresa's place, and Hans was there. And then after that, so 2 weeks, we did not see each other, only on that Sunday. And then on Monday, we see each other privately. Oh, my dear friends, it was, you've all went through it. I mean, it was electricity. Of course, we had that looking at each other when we met, But here, we were in private. We then met one more time, and then 4 weeks later, we were married. We could not, this was too much of a thing for us. So we were married for 36 and a half years. Yeah. I'm 84. I'd have to think back. Oy, oy, oy. But yes, we were married.
Let me explain. Hans was also a Holocaust survivor. He had survived the war in hiding.
Yes.
And he also had suffered serious trauma from his experiences during the war. And Trudy and Hans, so they were married, they had 2 boys.
Yes.
And they never talked about about the Holocaust, about surviving the Holocaust, about being survivors. Their children never knew that they were Holocaust survivors until their children were fully grown men.
Yeah, well, they were teenagers, like 17, young men. And then I said, Hans, we have to tell our sons what happened before. And so we did, and young people are much more understanding than we oldsters think that they would be. They said, why didn't you tell us a long time ago? And we had a catharsis in the family that was so strong. To this day, my sons, their mama. Yes.
But what happens psychologically when you suppress trauma is it doesn't stay suppressed forever. And
Yes.
after Trudy's sons grew up and left the house,
Yes.
Trudy went into a very serious depression, and sort of all the trauma that she had parked somewhere or put into a drawer and shut suddenly came back out, and she became so depressed that she stopped talking, stopped eating, stopped getting out of bed,
That's right.
like almost a catatonic depression.
Yeah. So I had to see a doctor, a psychiatrist, and it was Dr. Solo that helped me get out of the depression. First, I didn't even talk to him. And gradually, our conversation started to roll, and I told him about my life. And
But Trudy at that point was still a woman of very few words. And Dr. Solo said to her, if you're not going to talk to me, then you need to draw, or you need to paint, or
Yes.
you need to make art.
Yeah.
But we need to communicate. Otherwise, seriously, he was going to have you committed.
right, but you see, then he also added, he said, wouldn't you like to dress a doll like your doll was dressed? And we had 2 sons. I didn't have any dolls in the house. So I went and bought a doll and dressed her. And as I put on the Mogen David on the coat, I thought, why the Mogen David? And started to read about our history, that we Jews had for centuries had to wear different tags on our clothes in different time periods in these centuries for the rest of the population to see that we are Jews. How
To make the persecution easier.
Yeah, and that really told me volumes of who we are and how proud we should be. We have survived. We're here, you know.
So, dolls have haunted Trudy throughout her life. They figure prominently in a lot of her work. But Trudy dressed a doll similar to the doll that she had
Yes.
as a child.
Right.
And from there, she
Yeah.
began this research.
Yes.
And it became a series of dolls that is now in the Holocaust Museum LA, which used to be the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust.
Yes.
It's their most popular exhibit. It's called Badges of Shame, and it's 11 different dolls dressed in the costume that singled them out as Jews over 11 different centuries in many parts of the world.
Right. And you know, they accepted that collection when I brought it to them. I only brought one doll, and they were just, oh yes, we'll take the collection. And it's still there, and it's a teaching tool as to how it's very important how degrading different ways that people are put down by wearing a badge or like I said, a marking of a red marking or something like that. And so it is still there. I'm just humbled by this. Yeah.
And so after creating this series of dolls, Trudy came home one day and decided that she was going to stitch some of her own life experiences, and she realized that she could draw anything she wanted to. She never had an art lesson in her life.
It was amazing, I sit there and, I can do this, okay. All right.
And I was talking to a few of you guys earlier about how she does this, but these tapestries are done with embroidery thread.
Yes.
Embroidery thread comes in 6 strands.
Right.
Trudy separates the strands, and in order to be able to get the detail needed to do the shadowing, because Trudy can do your portrait in thread. I mean, she's done her son, there's pictures in here. She's done Albert Einstein in thread, and her own sons in thread, and herself and her husband. Yeah. She can pretty much draw anything in thread, but she does it single strand by single strand. And she also uses beads because that's, so she does intricate bead work also.
Yeah.
But it's a form of realistic drawing in thread that I don't know that anybody else does.
Yes. Well, my dear Jody, and each time I do another piece, there's always a little bit something new that I learn. So we always learn, even if we become very efficient in whatever we do. Yes.
So little by little, Trudy starts doing what is now tapestry work. Mm-hmm. And her tapestries are huge. I mean, I was speaking to someone earlier, one of her pieces is 8 feet long. I mean, these are huge works. Yeah. And she has a piece called Final Destination that is a very large depiction of her experiences in the camps.
Right.
I call that piece her Sistine Chapel because it took her 10 years of tears.
Yeah. We couldn't bring it with us. It's too big for the car, so, yeah. But it's in the book.
But we did bring,
Jodie's book.
You should talk about this piece.
Oh, yes. This is
Kristallnacht.
When our books were taken away and burned, and I show you the Nazis as they shovel them into the fire, and then in the fire I have the Mogen David. You can see it, right? How it's burning, and it said "Kauf nicht bei Juden," that means "Don't buy by Jews." And up on the top, it's Sterndruckerei. That's the name of the publishing company. A Druckerei is a publishing company. And yes, and then I have the letters floating, our beautiful Hebrew letters floating as they were burning.
So I will say some of Trudie's work is intensely realistic. Some of it is more abstract.
Yes.
She has amazing breadth in her artistic vision. It's pretty amazing. But, you know, so her story is a story of an intrepid mother who would not succumb to all of the evil forces that, you know, tried to extinguish their lives. It's the story of art and how art can heal. And it's the story of an amazing woman and her amazing mother.
Right.
Right?
Well, wherever, of course, I have this wonderful temple audience here, but I do talk in schools also. And I often have to, not often, I always include, for a Holocaust never to repeat itself, we have to foster awareness of the slippery slope of racism and intolerance, while encouraging empathy as people view the Holocaust through the eyes of one survivor's artwork. Genocide is not confined to our past. Genocide and ethnocide persist in our world today, and it is to all of us to stand up for tolerance, inclusion, and compassion. We need civility to return, and you know, most of all, it's respect. Because when we think someone next to us is worth less than we are, this is where that slippery slope starts. And for us in the world to get along, we have to think that none of us is better than the next person. We're all human beings that want to get along. And respect and civility, that's what I teach. What is it, dear?
Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, yes.
I'll take the microphone if anybody has a question, we could use this microphone.
It's very compact.
Are your large pieces on display? You said the dolls are at the Holocaust Museum, but the larger pieces, is it somewhere that we could view them?
It's not on exhibit right now, it's in my home, but it's Jody who had the exhibits, her daughter Maya, who sponsored the last exhibits. But we've had COVID, you know, so we're kind of closed down for actually almost 2 years. And hopefully things will open up, and this subject will be important enough for schools or wherever they would want an exhibit that we would be there.
Is there a way we could find out when or where they'll be?
Yes, there's a way. There's a sign-up sheet outside, and Trudy has a website. It's just TrudieStrobel.com. And if you go to the website, you can also sign up on the contact list. And so the next time we're able to put together an exhibit, we would automatically let you know. The other thing is that the exhibit, my daughter Maya has financing in place to move the art. The Holocaust museums all shut down completely during COVID, and they're having a hard time sort of gearing back up and planning for the future. So we don't know. It was supposed to travel to Texas and Tampa. There's an incredible Holocaust museum in Tampa, St. Pete. But like, these museums suffered so much that like their schedules are all, it's just been a very difficult time. There was an exhibit that some of you guys have seen that was at the Mirage JCC in Orange County, and it was up and down over the 2 years of COVID. And finally, they did one last mounting of it and then shut it down because they were having so much trouble getting permission to allow people into their doors in person. But if anybody knows of a venue that has a gallery that would want to host an exhibit or put the work up, the work is amazing. It's important that it be seen. If it's in any community that puts the exhibit up, we arrange for schools to come and see, because so many children today don't even know what happened. And it's awful. And it's happening now.
Okay.
I think I picked up on a possibility of an answer to my question. You said that Maya has funding been committed to this program?
Yes.
Are we talking large amounts? Are we talking, because I mean, the vision of putting those 8-foot and the ones that we saw at the Mirage, transporting them
Is expensive.
Is expensive because, I mean, I had an art piece transported from Florida to California, and it cost me like $200.
And that was cheap.
Well, this was like 15, 18 years ago. But they had it boxed, and they had it wood around it, and all kinds of stuff. So my question is, where is this funding coming from, and is there the possibility of adding to it, or...
Yes. So the initial funding came from the Dragon Kim Foundation, which is not far from, like based not far from here, an incredible organization that empowers youth to effectuate a vision that they have that will somehow improve their communities. That money was all spent on the first exhibit because it was a huge surprise to Maya how expensive it is to put on a show and to transport the art, to hang the art properly. And then the Mirage JCC paid for everything at their facility. They're a well-endowed facility. She has the commitment of other funding, and that the project also always takes donations, but she has a commitment from this foundation called the Fishman Family Foundation. So if, for instance, the art needs to move across the country, which originally their dream was to move it to Charlotte, to the South, to places where this education is really lacking. And that was all in place, but it all got shut down, and then it just, a lot of these venues are still suffering. So yes, they still have that commitment of that funding if they can arrange to move it, and they are always, Maya is an amazing grant person. Like, she gets grants for things. So she's always applying for grants for like projects that she has.
Yeah, this 13-year-old little girl, I cannot believe it.
Well, she's 19 now. The Skirball does not do anything to do with the Holocaust. That's how they differentiate themselves. Trudy speaks at the Museum of Tolerance. We were at their dinner just the other night. They don't really have galleries. The Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust is very supportive, but they don't, that's not a huge facility. You know, it would be great to go, you know, once the Tampa St., you know, it's expensive to move these huge pieces to Florida, but the goal was to start there and then move it up the eastern seaboard to different venues especially in different southern locations.
Are there any other questions? I'm coming.
This was asked from one of the YouTube viewers. Have you considered the Bowers Museum for a presentation?
What's it called?
The Bowers Museum in Orange County.
No, does anybody, I've never even heard of them, have you?
Oh, big art museum.
Is it a Jewish museum?
No, it's not. It's in Santa Ana, and they have amazing exhibits there.
Does anybody know anybody there?
Well, we're members. Yeah.
You know, very down low.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't always work so well if you don't know somebody who's affiliated. Like, the great thing about the Jewish museums is that there's always somebody who knows somebody at a Jewish museum, right, in the Jewish community. Maya sent out dozens and dozens and dozens of queries to Holocaust museums, Jewish museums, all over the world, and has gotten very few responses except from like one in Texas, one in Detroit, one in Florida.
Thinking of the Bowers, do you have a lot of the this art? Does it have a lot of beadwork in it that could be for display? A lot of beads in some of the artwork?
Well, yes.
Because I'm a member of the Bead Society, which meets at the Bowers every month, but I can talk to the liaison. I can see what I can do, but I know they might be interested in definitely having her come speak, and they might pay to have a few pieces, especially with the beads, and talk about how you incorporate beads into your work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll check on that and maybe get your email or something.
Oh,
But
yeah.
are you still doing it now? And also, do you use, I do a lot of bead and embroidery and things like that too. Do you use special magnifying glass to be able to see every thread? I mean, are your eyes still good?
No, my eyes are so wonderful. I have for distance. Somehow I need to see you clearly, I need glasses. But to embroider, I need no glasses.
And because you guys are here in person, and this is such an amazing thing because we have not been in person in a very long time, Trudy brought you a special treat to look at.
I just finished this. This is the Well of Abraham. I'm going back in our history, number one place.
She thinks it's finished, but she keeps asking us in the car if she should be doing more on it.
To still do the background, but that's the pattern. You see the Well of Abraham. Yes.
And she draws all of this. Nothing's from a pattern of, she just does a very simple drawing on a piece of paper, and then she does a very simple outline.
And the words are from the Torah. These are, and I didn't go for any kind of rabbi explanations. These are from the Torah that I copied. Go forth from your land, and I can't see it now, but
Here, I can hold it.
you hold it for me.
If I would be helpful.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Okay, be careful
Yeah.
of that piece.
Go forth from your land. The Lord said to Abram, not Abraham, it was Abram at that time. Go forth from your land and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And he dug a well. Abraham dug a well, and this is the beginning of our Judaism, Abraham's well. This is where we started, and it was established that this land is Abraham's land. It was Jewish.
Another question back here.
I want to get back to your bead question. So the piece that Trudy began in the displacement camp, it's called Trudy's Goose. And Trudy still has it. And it is a piece of history because it is stitched on the skirt that her mother wore through the Holocaust. And it is a goose with a stiff neck so that it can hold its neck up and fly. And it speaks to freedom, it speaks to tyranny, it speaks to hope. But it was begun in a displacement camp right after liberation.
And it was done with all beads, as you were interested in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question from the YouTube viewers. Are you connected to the Shoah Foundation at all?
We're not. Trudy, the Shoah Foundation.
Foundations, no, I don't.
Trudy does a lot of work for Holocaust Museum LA, formerly LA Museum of the Holocaust, they just changed their name. the Museum of Tolerance, and
I've been teaching stitchery for the Holocaust Museum of LA. We had classes, so yeah.
and she speaks to schools on behalf of both of those organizations all over the place. But no, she's never worked with the Shoah Foundation.
This is all telling the story. That's the whole point of.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to save the stories before the survivors are gone.
Yeah.
Okay, one other question. What about the Norton Simon Museum or the Huntington Library?
Okay, so that's interesting. I live right near the Norton Simon Museum. I mean, I suppose it's sort of not what they do. They're not, the Huntington Library would be amazing, and one of Trudy's patrons, Alice, her son works there in some big capacity, but I think he doesn't like to listen to his mom.
Well, her son is on the board.
Well, I think he's the guy who raises. I think he's the one who raises all the money, but I don't know. I mean, they've been a little bit impenetrable. I mean, again, it's like, it's always who do you know?
And I have never tried anything myself. I don't know how to advertise myself. So.
Yeah, no, Maya is the one, she's now out of high school, but when she was in high school, she reached out to a lot of these places. A lot of places were like, why should I talk to a teenager? And she persevered, and obviously she got some traction in some places, and then had a lot of traction, which got interrupted by COVID. Her whole high school life got interrupted by COVID. But yeah, I mean, Pasadena, Trudy lives right near the Huntington. I live right near the Norton Simon. Pasadena is kind of an old Mayflower-y kind of place. Yeah. It's got its like society. I mean, it's not.
It's
what's the word?
provincial. It's provincial.
Hamisha? It's not the most Hamish city.
Okay, I'd like to just have one more question. Sergio has been waiting and waiting and waiting with his question.
Yes.
So one more question, and then those of us who are here in person are going to have some very good refreshments. And those of you who are at home, go into your kitchen, open your cupboard, and take your own refreshments out. Sergio?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for coming today and telling your amazing story. I'd like to know, in case I missed it, when did you first learn to sew and stitch? I assume it was your mother who gave you that great influence. And when did you begin your art and documenting your experience in the Holocaust?
Close to your mouth.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when it started.
Let's start with one question, which is, how did you first learn to stitch? You learned standing by your mother's side.
Oh, I was like 6, 7. Oh yes, Mama was always stitching. I actually helped her sew. This was now after we were out of the camps in this small town in Ammershausen, and she sewed for people. And we had no pinking shears. This was end of 45 for the inside seams, and in those years you had pinking shears. And so I was the one who did all the seams, both seams, with a buttonhole stitch to have it secure. So everything was delivered first class to everyone.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody who came here, and I want to thank you so much for an amazing presentation, and your story is truly, truly amazing. And just to meet you, and it's been wonderful, wonderful experience for all of us. Thank you so much.
I'm really a very reserved person. It's this little one here and Maya that that has done all of this. It's her book about me.
But thank you guys so much. You're a great audience, and Rita, thanks for sticking. Well, we've been trying to do this for a long time with all the COVID interruptions. So
I was very honored to be with you today. Thank you very much.